If you were a counselor at Camp Crystal Lake, and Camp Crystal Lake will be relevant later on, like I promise, but for everybody listening. But if you were a counselor at Camp Crystal Lake and you heard, there's a random killer wandering around this lake, would you want to be like, I'm going to kick this killer's ass? Or are you going to be like, nope, I'm freaking out of here. Goodbye.
Yeah. Well, for me, so my first instinct is going to be, I'm going to deny the whole, I'm not going to buy it. I'm not going to buy into it. I won't believe it until I see it with my own eyes. That's going to be my first instinct. If I do find out it's a real threat, I'm probably going to try to get the hell out of there, avoid any conflict whatsoever. But I'm 100% going to fight back if I have to. I'm going to find an axe, a chainsaw, whatever I can get my hands on. I will fight. I will not go down without a fight, Brandy. I can tell you that much.
You're braver than I am, that's for sure. I'd probably be doing a 180 and getting the hell out of there.
Well, that's probably what I would try to do. But if I can't get my way out of there, I'm going to find something.
Hello to everybody. How are you? It is I, the Terrorific Lady, otherwise known as Brandy. Welcome to Retro Horror School Talks, where I grab someone, bring them on here, kicking and screaming to talk and gush over what else retro horror. My latest victim is Justin from the podcast Pop Culture Reflections. And for those of you who remember, he had me on one of his episodes quite a while ago to talk about American Psycho. So welcome, Justin. It's great to have you here on my show.
Listen, thank you for bringing me on. When I saw that you were doing this, I reached out, pretty directly, and I was like, hey, I would love to be part of this this program. I'm so glad that you allowed me to come on, especially to talk retro horror, because even though I'm a pop culture guy, horror is my thing, especially retro horror. I'm really looking forward to this, Brandy, so thanks for having me.
Oh, again, thank you for being on here. For those of you who may not know who you are, who don't follow your Instagram, or who don't listen to your podcast yet, everybody should listen to it. Tell people more about what Pop Culture Reflections is all about.
Yeah, Pop Culture Reflections is a passion project where I originally started talking about nostalgia, whether it was toys, video games, commercials, television shows, cartoons, all that. But it's evolved into more focusing on music, movies, television, pro wrestling. I'm a big pro wrestling geek, especially from the 80s and 90s. So I incorporate that as well. And, I started bringing guests on, like, you were one of them. And I had such a blast talking with you about American Psycho. So it's evolved into like a conversation with me and a guest about how we can geek out about things in pop culture that we love. And it started out as like 80s and 90s specific, but then I said beyond, because I knew I would probably start getting into the 2000s and even the 2010s and more modern. And then I'd always want to have room for even the 70s if I want to talk about that. It's basically anything from pop culture, but it's primarily fun discussions about our feelings on movies, music, television, pro wrestling, and all kinds of stuff. If you love pop culture, if you love horror films, I got a little bit of that as well. I think you'll have a lot of fun with the show. And you can find me on Instagram. Just look up Pop Culture Reflections Pod. Find me and join me on the journey. I would love it.
Yes, and you definitely you reached out to me pretty quick, like after I asked for guests, and it took us a while to decide on a movie, but then I was listening to an episode of yours and you were like, I love Friday the 13th. I love anything Friday the 13th. So I was like, well, let's do something Friday the 13th. And that's what we were talking about today. Friday the 13th, part 2. Yes.
Yes.
It came out in 1981, so not long after the first one. It's directed by Steve Miner, who, for those horror fans out there, he's directed House, the movie House, which I think came out in 1985. He directed Halloween H2O, which came out in 1998. And I think he also directed the third Friday the 13th. The one where Jason gets his mask.
I believe so, yes.
That's I'm looking here. He did. I was right. I was right. And it made $22 million at the box office, which is not a bad take for 1981 in the slightest. Though, looking back on Friday the 13th, do you remember the first time that you ever watched that movie? Did you watch it early on? Did you catch it later in life?
One quick thing about this movie coming out in 81. I was born in 81, so I have this connection to this. I always think to myself, like, Jason was born the year I was born. I know his backstory was there in the first film, obviously, but him as the true villain started in 1981, which is a nice little connection to me being born that year. So obviously being born in 81, I did not see this film right away. For me, it was like my earliest memories of this franchise, like 1, 2, and 3. The first 3 installments kind of run together. I saw most of the franchise in the late 80s, early 90s, obviously, as I got a little older. Still very young to watch these films, but it was the 80s. It was a weird time. When I was a kid growing up, like part 6 through 8 were like my favorites. They're the ones I watched the most. They were the ones that were playing on, TBS or TNT or Channel 11 or whatever they were playing on. So I watched those the most. But eventually I would come to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all of those. I could not pinpoint the first time I watched part 2, but I guarantee it was somewhere in that late 80s, early 90s when I was watching all of them. So no way they weren't in order. They were all scattered all over the place. I probably knew Hockey Mask Jason before I knew Sackhead Jason. So I came to it in a little bit different way, but it's all good. But yeah, so that to answer your question, late 80s, early 90s, probably.
I came into it a little bit later in life. Like you, I was watching like the goofy Jason movies, the 6. This is part 6, 7. Actually, not 7. 7 came later, but mainly part 8 is what I remember watching as a kid. I bet you anything they knew what they were doing. They were marketing that movie probably towards kids.
Yes.
This movie is definitely a slasher. Came out in 81, and the 80s were definitely the era of the slasher. Slashers were huge. They were very easy to make. You saw them everywhere. Like, what do you think it is about slashers that people like or that sticks with people just even all these years later?
So for me, it's a great question. For me, I think what it is, if you talk about slasher as a subgenre in horror, I think what it is for the most part, slashers seem to have a really good balance of scares and fun. And then they also are, notorious for the jump scare and the villains becoming almost like these popular characters within the franchises they're part of, or even sometimes even standalone films. But the villains always kind of stand out as a unique character. So I think it's these unique characteristics of the villain. A lot of times, even the protagonist in the films have a very unique characteristic as well. And I think all of that lends itself well to rewatchability. And I think that's what it is about this subgenre. And I know horror has other fun elements in it as well in other subgenres, but I think the slasher seems to do that best with balancing the scares and the fun, and making the villainous character more of the out front character, giving them unique characteristics and giving people a reason to want to go and see these movies over and over again. Hence the reason why a lot of these slashers have so many installments. It just proves how fans just love them so much.
And also another thing that I really like about slashers is you mentioned just about a strong protagonist, and especially strong women protagonists, because it was not the norm to have strong female protagonists. Because usually it was just like the damsel in distress like type of thing. But the 80s, especially slashers, gave these types of characters their own agencies and their own strength, and they're able to just like kick ass. I love it.
Me too. Yeah, it's one of my favorite parts of a slasher is the fact that you have a strong female protagonist. That's something that really appeals to me. And I know that there's other subgenres that have that as well. Like if you think like a movie like Alien, obviously Ripley's one of the greatest female protagonists of all time. But I just love that slashers utilize that method so often, and it's what really makes it one of my favorite subgenres in all of film, let alone horror.
Yes, and a lot of times for me, slashers, like even those in the 80s, like some seem dated, some still hold up to me, and I enjoy watching them. Is a Friday the 13th Part 2 one of those slashers that you feel holds up to multiple watches, or do you think it's a little bit dated?
So it's funny, you already introduced how I love the Friday the 13th franchise. It's my favorite franchise, right? I'm a little biased, I suppose, but for this series has 100% shaped me as a horror fan. So, all horror is good, but the Friday the 13th films are like a different animal to me, and part 2 is excellent. So, I think it does hold up well. You could look at some of it and say it's dated, sure, but I think it's aged really well. I think it's probably aged just about better than any other installment in this franchise, at least to me. Um, and I don't know what it is about it. I think that it's we're gonna get into her at some point, but I think Ginny's part of it. I think it's that we got our first taste of the Jason Voorhees character. Yes, a completely different version, obviously,
Yeah.
from what we would come to know. But I think that first film, there's a lot of people that like the first film. I'm not a fan of the first film. I have a lot of reasons for that. And one of them is I don't think Pamela Voorhees is a strong enough, villain character to me. So I think bringing Jason in was the key. And even though maybe at that time it was a money grab, this to try to keep this thing going, but they probably didn't know what they had in their hands and what this was going to evolve into. But yeah, to answer your question, I really feel like part 2 holds up well. There are some installments don't hold up as well to me. First one being one of them. But part 2 gets better with age for me. I probably like it more now, Brandy, than I did 10 years ago, and certainly more than I did 20 years ago. It's just as an adult, I really appreciate for how good of a film it is.
Yeah, and it's the key to me is about slashers, especially this one. And why I like it so much is that the story is just very straightforward. It's not convoluted. It's not going in 20 different directions. It's just there's counselors at a lake. There's Jason with a sack on his head, and I don't know, a pickaxe. Yes,
Yes.
and he's trying to off everybody one by one because he doesn't like people being near his lake. Why can't people just stay away from his lake?
Yeah, I feel like this, of all the characters in horror during the 80s, Jason would have been the one that would have been easiest to avoid, yet people didn't do it. They just kept coming back. What are they thinking?
I don't know. Maybe they're just having massive giant brain farts, or I have no idea.
Exactly. I don't get it. I don't get it.
Friday the 13th Part 2 is the first time we see an adult Jason Voorhees. In the first one, Jason Voorhees was a child, ghost child. I have something that's just in Alice's mind, who knows? But with that aside, logic aside, and assuming that Jason didn't drown, because you have to suspend that logic and assume that he didn't drown for him to be an adult. The film explores different themes. There's some isolation and vulnerability in there. There's a hint of seeking of revenge and how people deal with trauma. And there's a little bit of just about a folklore urban legend in there. Well, how do you feel that these themes, or any other themes that you can think of, how do you feel that they're expressed throughout the story, the plot, the characters, just what have you?
Yeah, so I think with the isolation and vulnerability, when you look at the character Jason, it's right there, right? So even if we don't gather it immediately, as we start to piece this together, this character has had to survive on his own, essentially, right? Because his mother presumed he died in the lake, right? So he's had to live on his own, living off the land, um, since he was a child, presumably. Again, like you said, if we just assume that's what happened, that he survived from the lake, but obviously he was not with his mother anymore. So yeah, there's the isolation for Jason, growing up by himself, you know, coming into an adulthood, learning how to survive on his own, hunt, take care of himself. And then you talked about revenge. And I think the first film obviously sets that up already. Pamela's seeking
Yeah.
revenge for the death of her son and the neglect of the child. And we can understand her plight, and we get that. And that's the one aspect I really do appreciate about the first film. But then it takes, when we get into part two, and now the roles are reversed. Now Jason is, seeking revenge for the death of his mother. And, and obviously mentally he's hearing his mother speak to him. So you have that aspect that's right back here in part two, but a whole different dimension now that we have Jason as an adult. And then, you said about urban legends. So we get, like, in this film, the counselors are literally telling in this urban legend story to them around the campfire. It doesn't get much more symbolistic than that, which I love. And so it's the whole idea did this really happen? Is it just a tale? Is it an urban legend? And then unfortunately for them, they find out the hard way that it's not. So yeah, this movie is built on those premises, and I think it really executes them well. I think it executes those in a lot of ways better than the first film, to me.
I would agree with you there. And even okay, spoiler alert for anybody who hasn't seen part two, if I really do appreciate the way that they handled Alice's trauma in the beginning, even though she didn't last for very long. Is just the way that she dealt with the trauma is in some ways how I would deal with trauma. Like, I would just try and shove it down, pretend that everything's fine, I don't want to deal with it, but it didn't like treat her like a little girl or a scared infant. In a way, it didn't infant. I can never pronounce this word. Infantilize. There we go. Her. And I really
No, I
did
agree.
appreciate that.
I agree. Even though she has, like you said, a very small part in this film, they do that very well. I think some people probably wish they would have kept her in the film a little bit longer, and we would have got more of that story maybe as the movie went on. But even still, I love the movie the way it goes, and I really love Ginny. Again, I'm probably going to get into that more, but so I want it to be her film, so I get that. So I give the whole thing a pass with Alice, but I agree with you 100%.
Yeah. And speaking of Ginny, she has to be one of my favorite final girls in the Friday the 13th franchise. One of my absolute favorite scenes is when she runs into the bathroom of Packanack Lodge, and she's holding the door to try and keep Jason out. Then she sees that the window's open. She's like, oh my God, I need to close the window, but I also need to be holding onto the door. I thought that was a really just awesome, tense scene. And then the jump scare right after that. What other scenes or techniques used or scares do you feel were really effective?
I actually, like, on rewatches of this more recently, like, I have really dialed into the jump scares in this film. And Brandy, I think this film has some of the most effective jump scares of all the films in this franchise, right? Like, I had this in my notes for one of the questions later, but I'm gonna talk about it now. Like, the first time we properly see Jason, his head with the sack on his head, when he sits up from under the covers on the bed, what a jump scare. Like, he comes up out of nowhere and he, like, comes right at the camera. And oh my God, I get chills just thinking about it. It is so effective. And then there's another scene, like, when Jason's coming after her and Ginny runs outside and she gets in her vehicle. And I think the vehicle won't start, because she's had trouble with that in the film. And then so she kind of ducks down and she's trying to hide. And she knows Jason comes out, but she's not sure where he is. Well, here Jason duck down, and we don't even know that as an audience. And then at some point he pops up and you see him out the car window right next to her. What an effective jump scare. And then, obviously not to spoil too much, but that last jump scare at the very end of the film when we think all is well and he is dead, iconic.
Yes, another scene that I felt was really effective, maybe not creepy, was, again, spoiler alert, people, watch this movie if you haven't. It's good, but the end where she talked earlier in the film just about the psychology of
Yep.
Jason. It's just like, man, he watched his mother die. Like, how did that shape him? And then she used psychology against Jason by putting on his mother's sweater and trying to pretend that she was mommy. And just like, I love that. That was so cool.
I do too, and it's one of the things I love the most about her character and her development is that she is so intelligent and so resourceful to do that. Where I think they kind of tried to do a little bit of that in later installments, but it was all here, and Amy Steele's performance through it is so believable. I just absolutely love her, Brandy. She is, again, I'm kind of like leaving the cat out of the bag already, but she is just an unbelievable character, an unbelievable actress. I love her in this film. She's one of the big reasons why this is, one of my favorite films.
Yeah, the way she reacts to Jason is so just, it's believable. Like, it's not like, oh no, look, there's a killer. I've seen that sometimes in some slashers. Like, why aren't you more worried about this? There's someone trying to come and kill you. But no, her reactions were so believable. And I think it's the way that any normal person would react on seeing someone like that.
100%. Very natural the way she, she portrays the fear and everything.
Yeah. And speaking of, this movie wouldn't be without Jason, wouldn't be a Friday the 13th movie. And he's now considered in the horror slasher world one of the big three, with the other two being, of course, Freddy Krueger and Michael Myers. What is it, do you think, about Jason Voorhees that's made him such a part of not just horror iconography, but pop culture iconography? Maybe pop culture is your wheelhouse. Let's hear your spiel on that. What makes Jason so memorable?
Okay, so, and you hit the nail on the head. It's the three big ones, right? And there's other ones. Let's face it. The Chuckies of the world and the Leatherfaces of the world and Ghostface. But those are a different conversation for a different day. But Freddy, Michael, Jason, and I think a lot of it is because of when they came out, in the late 70s, early 80s, and, onward. They have so many films in their franchises. I think that's a big part. But why Jason stands out to me is it's the look with the hockey mask. I think that the hockey mask is a very important component of why Jason is an icon, right? And I don't know what it is, Brandy. I don't know if it's because of the sports thing that just brings a lot of nostalgia and pop culture references to it with the old hockey mask and everything. But also, like, if you think about the way he moves and the way he hunts people, yes, Michael Myers has some similar traits, but Jason stands out because of his look, and then the fact that he not only is this human Jason at one point, but he becomes basically like a zombie Jason. It's a whole thing, right? Goes to space, all that. But most importantly to me is the idea of his origin story, the fact that he is a victim at first. Yeah. He was a victim first, and you as an audience could find yourself feeling for him. And I think that gives him a certain dimension that makes him stand out among all of the rest of them, whether it be Freddy, Michael, or all the rest of them throughout the history of horror. And maybe that's just me, but I think it's that relatability of a child that presumably drowned in the lake and got neglected, and he's different than all the other kids and all that part, right? And then you had the mother who was avenging him, and then she gets killed. And then he has to figure it out again, like he has to survive on his own. And yes, he's the villain. Yes, he's a monster. Yes, he kills people. All that, right? But as a viewer, right, yeah, he's all kinds of bad, right? But as a viewer, there's times where you can sense his vulnerability of him as a child again when he tilts his head and when he thinks about things with his mother, and all of a sudden you're like, yes, this is a monster. But then I can tap back into he was a victim first, and that gives him this layer of dimension that the rest don't have, to me.
I would agree with you there. It's really quite the quandary because at times that you end up feeling for Jason because he was bullied, because of just what happened to him. And then other times, like, wait a second, he goes around killing people with a machete or just like what mainly machete or just like pretty much whatever like he can find. And I think that's what gravitates me a lot towards Jason. I mean, Freddy's got a cool look, Michael's got a cool look, but they're essentially villains first. Their whole part of their backstory is you're not meant to feel sorry for either one of them.
Exactly.
Jason, you can.
Right. There's that little boy thing that always like exists inside of him that you can't forget about. It just keeps coming back to you. So you're absolutely right. I really think at its core, it's that. And I also think it's the hockey mask and the look of him and that he's been through all these different phases and he's evolved as a character, unlike the other ones. I think he's probably had more evolution as a character, and a lot of it's the film choices, taking him to space and going to Manhattan for a little bit, stuff like that. But that all it builds to the lore of what Jason Voorhees is.
And we're not really talking about Jason in space, but I just have to say, it seems like it's the natural direction for all franchises to go in. We've done everything else. Let's just put them up in space.
Exactly.
Except with Alien. They were already in space. So now they're bringing them down to Earth.
Right.
Apparently. I guess that's their evolution. All right. Well, slashers are violent. We know this. They are full of gore, guts, and body count galore. And the original film faced opposition and criticism, and so did Friday the 13th Part 2. People were saying, all this violence in this film is very problematic. And I don't know if you knew this, they had to cut a lot out of this film to even get it to a rated R. And lots of 80s slasher movies were criticized because of the excessive violence. Siskel and Ebert dismissed slashers. There's dead teenager movies. And even they gave out Betsy Palmer, who played Pamela Voorhees in the original movie. They even gave out her address so people could write to her and complain. It's just like, geez, okay. Beside that being mucho wrong, why do you think that some people had such a visceral reaction to slashers like Friday the 13th Part 2? Like, what's up with this? Just like, sense of disgust.
Yeah, it's strange to me, and because when you and I both know this very well, like audiences then and now flock to horror films.
Yes.
Love the genre. So audiences loved it. Obviously, it was making money. They kept making sequels. Audiences then, just like now, loved it and had no issues with it. But the critics and anybody that was involved in talking about these franchises or this genre, I guess I should say, anyone that was on television or in publications that were talking about this when it comes to critically what it is in cinema, it's like, to your point, like they almost treated horror like snuff films. Like, they couldn't separate the fiction from reality, and I'm not sure what it was. Now, I will say, like, I don't know if, like, with certain critics, especially back then, they hated this stuff because it didn't quite fit into what they considered to be a great film. But I think about when I look at this movie, when I watch it now, Brandy, it's really tame compared to a lot of other stuff. And it is because they had to edit it so much. So I think to myself, like, what would these directors think of Terrifier when you compare that to what we had with some of these slashers? They're very tame in comparison. So I think it was a product of its time. I think back then horror films, especially slashers, just didn't get taken seriously the way they do now. I think a lot of critics have come around to it over the last 10, 20 years and have shown some more appreciation for what it can do with a very small budget and how much money it can make and what they do technically, which is really impressive with what these filmmakers can do with practical effects and stuff. So I think people have turned around on it. Maybe it's younger generations now that are the critics and the writers that maybe grew up on this stuff, where back then, Siskel and Ebert didn't really grow up on this kind of stuff, so they could not see any good in it. That's probably the only way I could really, define why I think they had such hate for it.
You have a good point. Siskel and Ebert probably didn't grow up around and I know for sure they probably didn't grow up around the gory slashers. There we go. Brandy knows words. Congratulations. But they had probably stuff like the older kind of Universal horror, Creature from the Black Lagoon, Dracula, and things like that. And probably even back when those came out, people were probably like, So I guess like every generation of horror that comes out has their own but I guess slashers that was the 80s.
Exactly. Yep.
I noticed back there, is that a Jason mask that you have? Is that from like the NES game?
It is, and it's actually custom made. There is I wish off the top of my head, I can't remember the name of her shop that you can buy on like Etsy or on her webpage, but she custom makes those masks. I actually have that one. And I have one that is made to look like the mask from Part 6, Jason Lives.
Jason Lives is another like great movie, but I have a mask that I like kind of custom painted him.
It looks awesome.
Yep, this is Jason Takes Manhattan. Like
Very nice.
It. Even though I think that movie's kind of goofy now, this is my favorite style of mask. I kind of wish that Friday the 13th Part 2 Sackhead Jason caught on a little more because I really liked his look, but alas, it was the hockey mask that won out. Would you have rather seen Sackhead Jason maybe taken a little bit further? I would have. That's my answer. Yes.
I'm on the fence here because I too really love Sackhead Jason, but I think one of the reasons why I love it so much is because we only got it in one film. So it makes it very unique. I think had we gotten it in like Part 3 still, I don't know that I would have the same appreciation for it. Who knows? Because obviously it's hypothetical, but I agree with you. I kind of like it, and it would have been kind of fun maybe if we would have gotten at least one more film with him that way, but the hockey mask has become so iconic that I almost can't separate myself from it. But yeah, back to what I said, like I really like that it exists in just one film, and it makes this film so unique, a film I already love so much in this franchise. But I also think, back to the, what I like so much about it, I think this is one of the scariest versions of Jason with the sack head. And I don't know why, but I just think it's more frightening. I think once you put that hockey mask on, it's not like it's comical, but it almost seems kind of comical. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because it's like the first thing he saw, it's a hockey mask, and then he puts it on. I think the reason why I love Sackhead Jason is because it's realistic to me in the logic that a horror movie like has, that he would be looking for something to cover his face with because he doesn't want anybody to see it. But so what does he have on hand? Oh, look, it's like a potato sack, like a pillowcase like thing that you just cut one eye hole. I don't know why one eye hole though. That's the only thing that confuses me. Just why the one eye hole?
Yeah, I don't know if they maybe even I didn't look to see any research. I don't know if maybe they cut the two holes and it looked really weird. Plus, it would probably like not line up properly, so they just went with the one. But I've always wondered why it's 1, 2, or maybe they just like the look of one. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it would be really hard for me to see out of anything that had the one eye hole cut out of. But yeah, it's like I think his eyes are just like kind of off center.
Yes.
Remember
yes,
correctly.
they are. Yep,
so,
the one's kind of droopy. So
yeah. So the holes would be like those very diagonal. So he would just be. So maybe it's just easier to have the one eye hole and the mask is like cut out. But,
and another thing I want to say real quick about this Jason, I really like Warrington Gillette as Jason here. There's a lot of great actors, stuntmen that have portrayed Jason over the years, and almost each of them, I have a certain thing I like about them, but there's something about this one that he doesn't get talked about much when people talk about the guys that have played Jason. He almost gets overlooked all the time. And I
Yeah.
don't know if it's because of the sack head thing. So, because he's the only one that doesn't look like the rest because of the hockey mask, but I really like what he does here. I like his stature, and again, I think his portrayal is quite scary. I love his movements and everything.
Yes, and I just love the way he cocks his head, like either just like whether he's just trying to figure something out or he's just like, what's all that? What's going on? I really like that. And his going back to his jump scares. Yeah, just the way that he like portrayed them, especially the one in the bathroom gets me every freaking time. And I know it's coming and it still gets me.
The one of him coming out of the bed gets me. I'm like always ready for it, and then he comes out right at the camera, and I love it. I absolutely love it.
It's like you're like, I know it's gonna happen. I've seen this movie I don't know how many times, but it's still just like, I think also that's a testament to how, going back to how well this movie holds up, because if you've seen this numerous times and you know where each jump scare is going to be and it still gets you, then I would say that's a testament to how well it holds up and how effective the scares are.
100%.
Like, yeah, I wish we had more Jason movies in the Friday the 13th franchise. I mean, just I can't get enough of Jason, but the last Jason movie that they had came out as an attempt at a reboot of the franchise in 2009, where Derek Mears played Jason. And then there was the video game, which came out in 2017. And I think the lawsuit is what put the kibosh on a lot of any new Jason stuff. And now I think that has all been resolved and the lawsuit has been lifted. So in light of that, would you want to see more Friday the 13th stuff, whether it's a movie? Like, I know they're putting out the Crystal Lake show. But would you want to see like any new movies in the franchise? Or do you feel that this franchise has no more stories left to tell and it should hang up its mask or potato sack?
No, I 100% want a new film, but it has to be different, I think. But it very much has a place. But what my fear, Brandy, you pointed on, out it earlier about how back then it was a very simple story. Slashers had a formula and they really worked. And a lot of the horror films and slashers from the 80s and even early 90s were a lot of fun, and they understood the balance that. I'm just so concerned that if we get something new, it's going to take itself way too serious, and I don't think that's going to work. Not for us that grew up on this and love this franchise. I think we need a little bit of that balance of scares and fun, back to what I said earlier. So I'm a little concerned about what they would do with the story, but horror fans are some of the most loyal and passionate fan base you will find. So it absolutely has a place, and it will work without a doubt. Sure, people might go online and trash it because of certain aspects they don't like about it, like they did the reboot. But overall, looking at it, it will definitely work. I think all of us that are fans of this series want a new film, so I hope it happens. I will shout out the fan film series. Never Hike Alone is really great, and I really love the version of Jason in that fan film series. So I know it can be done, and it can be done well. And I think that the filmmaker that did that series kind of balanced some of that fun and scares and did a really great job. So I know it can happen. I just hope whoever does it can keep that in mind and really give us what we want.
Yes, that I would agree there. So just a good balance of just scares and fun, and then also keeping familiar aspects of what we know and love about Jason while updating and adding new stuff. I mean, if we constantly just saw, oh, look, it's Jason at Crystal Lake. Oh, it's Jason at Crystal Lake. Oh, look, it's Crystal Lake. Like, it would get a little old, like, after a while, I think.
I agree.
No. Okay, now I love on horror talking about just like what ifs. So we're going to picture a scenario here. We're going to imagine if Jason never got his mask. Here's what we're going to noodle on here. So Friday the 13th Part 2, again, awesome movie. It shows us the early stages of Jason as a killer. He's got that whatever you want to call it, potato sack, burlap sack, pillowcase. He has that instead of his hockey mask. Now, imagine that this Jason goes from part 2 to part 3. He never gets his mask in part 3. What if he continued to use his sack, or what if he decided to reveal his face? Do you think that he would be the same horror icon today if it was just potato sack Jason across like every movie from now to eternity? Or do you think the mask adds to who he is as a character?
Yeah, I don't think this franchise or the character has the legs without that hockey mask. I know it seems so simple and you would think that it shouldn't matter that much, but I think it's one of the most important aspects of the character from a pop culture standpoint. Like I said it earlier, and when you think about Jason as an IP, when you look at all the merch out there, it's the hockey mask. It's the hockey mask through and through. I just can't imagine a world where we have like merch that's just a sack head. Just a sack hat, and that's what people are buying. You know, maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm off the mark, but I just don't think that this franchise holds up as well. I'm almost wondering to myself, would it have even gone past 3-4 installments if they didn't use the hockey mask? And again, it just seems so weird that just that mask is what did it. But I really feel like from a pop culture standpoint, that hockey mask was what pushed it into the next direction and made it like this juggernaut of a horror franchise that lasted so long up until more recently. So yeah, to answer your question, I don't think so. I think without the hockey mask, you don't have this iconic character and franchise. I just don't.
Yeah, and even with no mask, I mean, you would have to decide, like, really just, are you going to stick with the same look? Like, if they decide to, like, not include the mask at all.
Right.
They decide what look to stick. And then I'm kind of with you as far as along the same lines of thinking as Potato Sack Jason. If he had no mask at all, I think Jason Voorhees would have just disappeared into the numerous other 80s slashers that had come out at that time.
Right.
So I think the mask was a good call. It's just like, but I'm a potato sack. I'm not an apologist. I don't think that's the right word. Like, I'm a potato sack Jason lover. I don't think I'll ever apologize for that.
And you shouldn't, because I love it too. I just, obviously, hockey mask is, what I think about when I think about Jason, but I really love this version of Jason from part 2, even still.
All right. Now we're going to go into what I like to call my retro lightning round. So I have some Friday the 13th part 2 related questions, and you're just going to say the first answer that comes into your mind. You could be quick with the answers, or you can decide to ramble on forever. Either way you want to go is fine with me. Okay. So here is your first lightning round question. So, if you were a camp counselor in Friday the 13th part 2, what would be your survival strategy? And you cannot say what Ginny did because that is too easy.
Okay. I'm going back to what I said earlier. I would find the biggest weapon I could find, whatever that might be. If it's a chainsaw, it's a chainsaw. I don't know. If it's an axe, listen, I'll go Leatherface on him if I have to. I'm gonna pick the most deadly weapon I can find to try to survive this. That's my only approach, because I'm not a fast runner, so I'm not going to try that. I'm going with the biggest, most deadliest weapon. Hopefully a chainsaw.
Yeah, Friday the 13th part 2 Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
That's right.
What is your favorite kill in Friday the 13th part 2?
Okay, so this one is always the one that stands out to me in this film, and it's poor Mark that's in the wheelchair. He gets the machete in the face, and then he goes down like that ridiculously long set of steps backwards on the wheelchair. It's so sudden. Like, I think like the camera is behind him, so we see the back of his head as he's trying to listen. And then all of a sudden, like, the machete comes out of nowhere in the face. And then, unfortunately, like I said, he goes down those steps, and it goes on forever. It's crazy.
All right. If you were in town and we're talking about Ralph, the old guy, and you were in town, you're getting ready to go to the camp, and Ralph says, "You're doomed. You're all doomed." Would you listen to him, or would you be very dismissive of him?
Yeah, I would be just like the kids that were in the movies. I'd be very dismissive. I'd be like, all right, this guy's out of his mind. I'm going to avoid him at all cost and head to the camp. So yeah, I'm stupid. I didn't listen.
But we watch so many horror movies. We should know to listen to the old guy that like spouts impending doom.
Exactly. I should know 100% to listen to that man. I should have followed him to wherever he wants to go with me, because he would have been right. But I wouldn't listen. I'd usually like, let's get away from this guy. Let's go to camp.
Yep. Justin didn't listen to Ralph, and he probably would not survive because of it.
Probably not.
Yep. Does the same kind of camp setting in Friday the 13th Part 2, does it add to the horror of the movie, or does it feel like just more of the same, like more of a continuation of the setting from Part 1?
Yeah, I think this is a common complaint that a lot of people have, is that it's more of the same. It's essentially like the first film rehashed with a different killer. But no, I think it adds to it. And what I love about the first two films specifically is that they're set in an authentic camp. And I love the look of it. It feels lived in. It feels believable. And I think that this installment adds to that whole tone of the camp. Obviously, the camp gets a little overplayed after a while, and then especially when they're filming it in places that aren't actually camps. And then you get other films out there that are also set in camps, and it gets to be too much. But those first two films set in those authentic camps, I thought were great, and this movie just adds to that to me.
And last lightning round question. Do you feel that this movie is 100% perfection and there was nothing that you would touch about it? Or do you think that there is something that could be changed to make it even better?
So I really like this film, but my favorite film in this franchise is Part 6, Jason Lives, for a lot of reasons, okay? It's not just a couple, but I'll give you two things that I really like about that I, again, now I'm like saying, oh, okay, let's just add these things from Part 6 to make this like the ultimate Friday the 13th movie. But these are two things I would add to this that I would like. Like if you were to take like in Part 2, we really don't have any kids at the camp, right? Because the kids haven't gotten there yet. But in Part 6, we actually get kids there, little kids there, and it gives you like this next level of danger, of sense of danger, because little kids are there. So I think that would add some stakes to this second film, so I'd really like that. And then the other thing that I really love about Part 6 is it's probably obviously very meta, but it's very funny. There's a lot of fun. There's a lot of tongue-in-cheek in Part 6. And I'm not saying they'd have to go full tongue-in-cheek in Part 2, but I would have liked a little bit more of those fun aspects in Part 2. If you do that, like add the kids and add some fun to this film, it's probably my favorite film in the franchise, because it has, like you said, the best final girl, bar none. Not only in the franchise, but to me, it's one of the best final girls in all of horror. I love Ginny. So you have that, and then you have a really cool sackhead Jason. You add those other elements, and like I'm all about it.
That would be good. Yeah, introduce the kids at the camp earlier. Come on.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have to worry about like 20, 30 kids. I've never been camping, so I can't say like how many people would go to a camp. So maybe everybody out there knows like how many people are at a camp, because I don't know.
There can be quite a bit depending on the size of the camp.
Yeah. But that would be an interesting thing. Two things to add to Friday the 13th Part 2. And speaking of, all good things must come to an end. And thus, this comes to an end. So thank you so much for coming on, Justin from Pop Culture Reflections. Thank you for coming on and talking.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a lot of fun. But before I let you go, you're not going yet.
Okay.
Before I let you go, what are some final thoughts that you have on Friday the 13th part 2 as to why people should watch it, or maybe it's been a while since they watched it. Why should they check it out again?
Yeah, so it's all the things that we talked about. It has fantastic jump scares. Some of the best of the franchise that are really earned, are really natural, and I love it. It's got great practical effects. Maybe not the greatest practical effects in the history of the franchise, but really good ones. It's an awesome setting. Like I said, I think it adds on to that first film with the authentic camp setting that looks great. It is, I already said it. It has one of the greatest final girls that you ever find in a horror film. Very intelligent, very believable, very natural, and somebody you can get behind. It's got a unique Jason that stands apart from all the rest in the franchise. So you got to watch it for that, if nothing else. And yeah, I mean, and for me personally, this is my second favorite film in the franchise, right behind Jason Lives. And there's been times when I've rewatched part 2 and had so much fun with it that I thought maybe this is my favorite one, because I love Ginny and I love the jump scares and I have a really fun time with it, even though it doesn't have as much blatant humor and fun as part 6. But there's a lot to be had here. And if you love horror films, it's got everything you want. And that's why you should watch Friday the 13th Part 2. If you never have, or if you haven't in a while, you got to check it out right away.
I second that. I second everything that you said. Now, tell us about, again, I know you mentioned it earlier in the podcast, but now we've come to the end. Now remind people where they can find you, where they can listen to you, and things they should be watching out for, just like any upcoming episodes or anything you want people to know.
Absolutely, and thanks again for the platform. I appreciate it, Brandy. This was a lot of fun talking about such a good movie. As far as the show, like I said earlier, if you like pop culture, and I know people that are watching this like pop culture, because horror is a big part of pop culture. So if you love that, you're gonna love my show. And even if not every topic appeals to you, I think you can have a lot of fun with the conversations I have. But if you love movies, there's a lot of great movies I talk about. Obviously, I talk about music as well. I'm really into 80s and 90s music, so we have a lot of fun conversations about that. There's also some television sprinkled in, and if you like pro wrestling, I have some of that too. So yeah, so go over. You can find me on Instagram, like I said earlier. You can find me also on Threads, Blue Sky, Facebook. I'm not on Facebook as much, but you can find the show there. And if you just search Pop Culture Reflections Pod, you will find the show. And the show is on all major platforms: Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, iHeart, just all those major ones, Podbean, Good Pods, all those. So you can find the show anywhere there. And as far as stuff I have coming up, it is going to be a lot of fun this year. It already has been. I have a lot of great stuff coming up. Some movies coming up really soon. I cover Ginger Snaps. I have the OG Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie coming up, which I am stoked for, as it's one of my favorite movies from my childhood. And then I already talked about earlier. I have a new sub series that's coming. You asked about what was coming up, and it is coming. It's launching in March. Going to be in the regular feed, but it's going to be like a separate thing. It's going to have a different name to it as part of this. And I have my co-host, Mr. Greg Hoey, a guy that's become a good friend of mine. And we are going to take some fresh new concepts to the show, where we're going to take pop culture and we're going to kind of compare and contrast music and movies and a lot more in a very interesting and entertaining way. So that's what's coming up. So be on the lookout. I think it'll be a lot of fun.
And I will make sure to have where people can find you in the description below. So for everybody watching, thank you so much for watching this episode of Retro Horror School Talks. Please like and share with fellow horror fans, and subscribe if you like learning about horror and retro horror movies. Class is dismissed, everybody, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.